What's up, Raiders? TristenWulf here, and in the middle of the weekend, we have got a summon event boosted up to 25x chance to get some specific heroes, and this time around, there's some pretty nice ones. So let's go over them and talk about which ones you should be going for, or if you got them, which ones you should be happy about. We're going to start out with Wallmaster Orthorion. Wallmaster Orthorion is an attack type legendary skill. Let's take a look at his attacks. Skyfall Arrow attacks all enemies, will not trigger counter attacks. That is a sick skill to have as an A1. I love A1s that hit the entire enemy team, and not triggering counters is nice into fights where you're dealing with counter attacks. Also, when he attacks, he will fill his turn meter by 5% for each enemy living after an attack. So he's going to cycle very quickly. When he doesn't kill, he'll get to take extra turns. And his A2 skill, Falcon Shot, attacks all enemies 2 times. The first one has a chance of placing buff block, and the second one has a chance of placing attack down. 2-turn debuffs, and you're likely to get one or the other, maybe both, on all of the enemies. And once again, every living enemy, 5% boost to his turn meter, helping cycle him even faster. And his A3 skill, Forever Marked, places an increased attack buff 50%, and an increased accuracy buff 50%, and an increased speed buff 30% on this champion for 3 turns. Now, it is kind of selfish, but it grants an extra turn, gives him a speed buff, an accuracy, and an attack buff. It's going to make these shots hit harder and have a greater chance of sticking the debuffs and make them cycle even faster. And for a passive, it's going to increase this champion's max HP by 20% for each enemy killed or Hydra head decapitated. I think it's pretty clear that this guy is a Hydra champion, and it can increase up to 50,000 health. Holy crap. So Wallmaster Orthorion, I think, is a really nice Hydra hero and has some niche uses throughout the game, but is there better options? Now, Cheshire Cat, holy crap, the Cheshire Cat looks so damn cool. I really wanted this guy, and he dodged me. I think I'm going to be going for the Cheshire Cat tomorrow. So the Cheshire Cat's A1 skill, attacks an enemy, and if the champion is under Perfect Veil or Veil, he'll attack all enemies instead. That's wild. And he places Perfect Veil on himself as soon as he does it, so very good synergy in this skill. His A2 skill attacks one enemy 3 times, so we do have a little bit of Fire Knight potential. Each hit will decrease the enemy's speed by 1% up to a 10% speed reduction. This effect does not work against bosses, sadly, so kind of a PvP hero. Each hit will also increase this champion's speed by 1%, so it's not double-edged sword, but double bonus, right? They get slower, he gets faster. And if this skill kills an enemy, it'll put Perfect Veil buff on him and the ally with the lowest turn meter for 2 turns. So some nice support built into this DPS-based champion. And his A3 skill, Grinding Helix, attacks all enemies before placing Perfect Veil and a 50% increase attack buff on this champion, and will grant him an extra turn if he kills an enemy. For a passive, if this champion is under Veil or Perfect Veil, his turn meter effects are 30% more effective. So any place he had a turn meter boost, they're 30% better. And if he's under Veil or Perfect Veil buff, his attacks will ignore 15% defense, which is going to make him hit even harder and do more damage. So he's going to hit harder and hit harder. So it's going to significantly increase his power. So it's a hero that you're going to want to have under constant Perfect Veil. And as an active skill, whenever he's about to receive a hit that would drop his HP below 20, blocks that incoming damage and places a block damage and Perfect Veil buff on him for 1 turn. So you can't even nuke the cat down. Wow. And he's got a speed buff too as an aura in all battles. I really want the Cheshire Cat. I hope I get lucky. Next we have Ruarc. Ruarc is an attack type legendary hero. Ruarc's Grin attacks one enemy and places an extra hit if that attack is a critical. So it's a 2-hitter as long as you crit. Not a lot to it, it's just a damage skill. His A2 skill, Scorn, attacks all enemies, AoE hit, placing an extra hit on targets with less than 50% health after the first hit. And each hit will ignore 15% of the target's defense. So another hard nuking skill that will help finish off already harmed enemies. And his A3 skill, Places a 50% increase attack buff and a 30% increase crit rate buff on this champion for 3 turns, making him easier to build with damage. He's going to already stack his own attack, and he's giving himself 30% crit chance, so you can run him at 70% crit. Once you get the skill off, he'll get an extra turn, and then he can get to nuking. Now, it does have a 6-turn cooldown, so if you want to play that 70% crit rate, you're going to have to book him. Otherwise, you're going to have windows where you're rolling the dice with a 30% miss crit, and a lot of his stuff relies on crits. So early on, you might want to stack the crit on him, but once you get him booked out, it makes him easier to build. And for a passive, Prince of Pride, whenever an ally is killed by an enemy, instantly activates Heiferach's Scorn skill. Heiferach's Scorn skill? That was this one that attacks all enemies and does the extra hit on enemies that are already harmed and penetrates and does extra damage. Whew. If there are multiple champions on the team, this skill will only activate once. So you can't run multiple Heiferachs, unfortunately. And also, when the enemy is killed and activates the skill, it doesn't put this skill on cooldown. So that's pretty freaking awesome. So Heiferach looks like a solid damage dealer to have on your team. Probably really good in PvP and arena. I'm still liking the cat a little bit better, but he looks pretty freaking amazing. Who is the next legendary hero we got? Galek. Galek looks cool. I love this look. Okay, what's this Night Revenant do? Galek attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of increasing the duration of all poison buffs on the target, heals himself by 2.5% of his max health for each poison debuff on the target. So you're going to want to run this guy into bosses where you're stacking poisons right out of the gate. I can tell that. His A2 skill attacks one enemy, places an extra hit for each poison debuff on the target, up to 3 extra hits. Wow. So the more poisons you got, the more Galek is going to do. And his A3 attacks all enemies, and the damage increases according to the number of poison debuffs on the target. Looks like Galek and Kale are going to be best friends. Pestilence places 4 poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns at the start of each round. You know, I said Kale's he's his own best friend. At the start of each round, 4 poisons. Well, that maxes out pretty much all of these skills. Oh my God. What else? Has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison. That's the big poison on all enemies for 1 turn at the start of each turn. At the start of each turn, he's going to stack even more poisons. Whenever an enemy places a poison debuff on this champion, instantly removes it and replaces it with continuous healing. Oh man. Taking him into fights where the enemy reflex debuffs back at you, get wrecked. Instead of poisoning my guy, you're putting a heal on him. So definitely a hero that you want to take into places where poison is going to be common and necessary to win. This guy looks like kind of some niche use, but that's a pretty sexy niche. So if you get this guy, I would be happy about it. He's going to be great in the places he's used. And of course, you know him, you love him, the immortal Sun Wukong. Wukong is a busted arena champion. I have one and I love him. He has carried me so far. His A1 skill has a 25% chance of placing a stun. It's a single hitter and it increases to 50% if you're hitting anybody with a buff. So you get a little bit of effectiveness on him and you are at 50, 60, 75% chance to stun off of an A1 skill into buff targets. His A2 skill ignores half of the enemy's defense, so it hits like a truck. And if he kills, all the excess damage splashes into everyone else, also ignoring 50% of the defense. And if the initial target survives somehow all of that, it turns him into a sheep, which is as debilitating for them as it is hilarious for me. His A3 skill attacks all enemies, and before attacking will steal buffs from all enemies and give them to Wukong. And of course, one of the sexiest passives in the game, after 3 of your teammates take turns, Wukong comes back to life with full turn meter and full health. Unless somebody's put a raise block on him, he just keeps coming back for more. And also 28 speed in arena. It's one of the highest speed boosts of any champion for arena fights. It makes him a must-have in almost every arena match. Now that's it for our legendaries. I think if I was going for one of these, I would probably go for Wukong, but since I already have Wukong and I'm not worried too much about Hydra yet, and as cool as the damage and the poison sounds, I just can't not go for the Cheshire Cat. Now let's look at the epics that are available. There is Geomancer. Geomancer, I mean, he doesn't look like much, but this dwarf, man, the dwarf faction is so stacked. This dwarf is amazing. His A1 skill attacks all enemies, all of them, and has a 30% chance of decreasing their accuracy for 2 turns. That doesn't seem like much, but just wait for it, wait for it. His A2 removes all buffs from the target and then attacks him. After he's removed the buffs, then he attacks. He steals all buffs instead if the target's under HP burns. So if you've got HP burns, he's not just going to strip, he's going to steal. And he reduces the cooldown of Quicksand Grasp by 2 turns. That's his A3 skill. We'll get to that in a minute. If the target is killed while under an HP burn. So again, very important to have HP burns out there, and for this guy to try to kill things or hit things that have buffs that are under HP burn. Makes him a thinking man's unit. Very, very strong skill, but this is the big one. Quicksand Grasp fully depletes the target's turn meter. Fully, just from full down to nothing. It makes Geomancer insane, especially if you get his cooldowns. You get him booked out to get him down to a 3-turn cooldown on this so he can spam it. Has a 75% chance of placing HP burn on the target. We all saw how good HP burns are with this guy, and a 25% weakness debuff on the target. So they're doing 25% less damage to you. Once you ascend it, it will fully fill Geomancer's turn meter by the amount the target loses. So if you take 85% with that full turn meter depletion, you're practically giving Geomancer an extra turn. So yeah, wow, and wow. I have used this guy to clear so much content. I was so excited when I picked one up. Everyone was telling me how good he was, and I didn't necessarily believe it. And now that I've tried him out, you definitely want this guy on your team. For a passive, he decreases the damage of all allies by 15%, damage received by 15%, and deflects that damage onto the enemies that are under HP burn. So you get hit for 1,000 points of damage, 150 of it is going right back to any enemy under HP burn. It allows him to passively do damage. It allows you to watch the enemy hurt themselves. I'm sure you're not nuking anything with it, but in for a penny, in for a pound. This guy will help you clear the content. Whenever this champion is attacked, deflects 30% of the damage instead. When deflecting damage on each enemy, has a 30% chance of dealing the amount of damage equal to 3% of the target's max HP. Woo! When this procs, you see it. You see it big time on the PvE fights. So fantastic hero to take in, gives a 25% HP boost in all battles. I think Geomancer is definitely a character you want on your team. Tell me it's not Farkin Fat. Okay, guys. I'm sure it's Farkin the Fat or something like that, but Farkin the Fat. Farkin Fat is a attack type hero. He attacks one enemy, 40% chance of putting a defense break on them for 2 turns. It doesn't seem like that much for an epic skill, but a 60% defense break is strong, and having that on A1 skill can be useful in fights where you're dealing with only one target. His A2 skill, Brand of Shame, again, attacks single enemy, has a 75% chance of putting HP burn and 2 poisons. Pretty good synergy with a couple of the other heroes, a couple of the other Legos on this for 2 turns. And his A3 skill has a 30% chance to places a 30% increased crit rate buff and a 30% increased crit damage buff on all allies, except for him. He doesn't need it. And then all allies except this champion will attack one enemy target. So you will buff your entire team, and then you'll all nuke into it. This makes this guy a pretty good champion to take into certain boss fights where you need everybody to do accelerated damage. Even though he is an attack type champion, he facilitates damage across your entire team. And body block deflects 20% of incoming damage this champion receives onto all allies. The damage will spread equally across all allies. So he kind of has a reverse mitigation skill. He mitigates himself, but he shares that incoming damage with his friends. So little bit of a double-edged sword there. He's going to greatly increase your damage output, but also kind of maybe threaten your own team a little bit with his damage spread. So he is somebody you want to take into fights where you're trying to nuke down quickly, and you're trying to get things done fast. He will facilitate speed running a lot of bosses. And Allure. Allure looks amazing. I am feeling into demons right now. Okay, so Allure, her A1 skill attacks 3 times, decreasing the target's turn meter by 25% on each critical hit. Holy crap. Fire Knight, anybody? Oh my god. Her A2 skill attacks all enemies twice. It's a 2-hitter, and each hit has a 30% chance of a defense break. Can place a sleep buff for 1 turn on targets who are also defense break. So that's going to give her some really good use in PvP as well as PvE. And her A3 skill attacks 1 enemy and has an extra 30% chance of increasing a critical hit. So if you're only caring about this skill, you can run her with less crit. And when it's ascended, she'll ignore 50% of the target's defense. So we got a pretty solid nuke on her A3 skill and a lot of control and support on her A. For an attack type character, I love attack type characters that have support built into their kit. It makes them so versatile. She also has a increased accuracy in faction crits by 50. Going to make her very useful there. Allure is who I am going for. As funny as Parkin the Fat is, I'm going for Allure. I would recommend, though, that you go for Geomancer. I'm not going for him simply because I already have him, so I'll be chasing down Allure. So let me know what you guys think. Am I on target? This is a raw look at their skills. I've not practiced or played with any of them, with the exception of Wukong and Geomancer. The other ones are brand new to me, and that's just how I feel looking at these kits, where I plan on taking them and what I plan to go for. We'll confirm and lock those in, and I will do my summons tomorrow. I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care, Raiders.